Hey, I'm Naturally Lydia and I'm outside today by the compost, which you might be thinking, ooh, that's like the ugliest shot ever of your homestead. But here it is, my compost in all of her glory, looking pretty gross, but super useful. So a lot of questions I get asked about composting. We actually did this when we lived in town with a small backyard. We've been composting a while and it can be as difficult or as easy as you want to make it. So I'm just going to go over a few little things to kind of help you out getting started, what ours looks like, troubleshooting, do's and don'ts, and what exactly it looks like. So stay tuned for Composting 101. So the compost does not have to be pretty. All you really need, and this is a pallet made compost and it works pretty well. It's got a little bit of cover. You actually want it to get wet and rained on, so you don't want to cover it too much, but you want some airflow. So one thing you always talk about when you hear about compost is the warmth. So actually just the breaking down and the decomposing and the rotting of these materials is going to create some heat. And the heat basically is just it working, it's activating. Obviously it won't be as hot and have so much heat during the winter, but it's still breaking down. A great thing you can do in the winter is throwing leaves over your compost, just right on top. You don't have to do a lot of stirring. Obviously in the winter months it's probably frozen. Nobody expects you to get out here in the frozen snow and stir your compost. Just let it be. This is going to be really, really great to add to the garden each year. So what can you compost? So compost is basically just greens and browns. So your greens are your nitrogen-rich materials and your browns are your carbon-rich materials. So basically we have a compost container in our kitchen underneath our sink. We actually have two. And we add all of our coffee grounds. We get organic filters, so those go in also. All of our eggshells, any vegetable scraps, things like that. You do not want to put in there. Meat, dairy, don't put those in. No. That's gonna make a really gross compost. It doesn't break down well and it's gonna deter your worms. So you're looking for organic rich materials, all your greens. So anytime you're cutting up fruits and vegetables, throw your scraps into your compost. Anytime you crack an egg and make something, throw your eggshells in. Coffee grounds, things like that. I do have organic parchment paper that breaks down, so you can put in that in too. And then you're talking about your browns, okay? So those were your greens. Your browns is gonna be cardboard without any colorant or waxy film over it. You just want like a regular cardboard, scraps of paper, dry leaves, things like that. Even like small sticks you can throw in there. So you want an equal mix of those, and that's the goal you're going for. All of those can be thrown in. And would you believe that 50% of our waste is actually organic materials that can be composted? I actually think it's one of the best things we can do for our environment is just composting at home. So 50% of our waste doesn't need to be thrown away. It can be composted, which can build up depleted soil. It's great for your gardens. It attracts worms. It's so great for the environment. So if you took 50% of the waste that you're actually throwing in the trash, it could turn into the best soil for your garden ever. So I have a lot of people that say, my compost stinks. It smells so gross. I can smell it downwind. Well, that just basically means you have too many greens. So you're going to want to add more leaves, more paper, more of the browns, okay? So it's just got a little bit too much greens. So that's your easy problem solving. Start collecting some newspapers to throw in. That's my chickens. They all think, they're like, well, what are you doing? Just start collecting some of those things, or dried grass clippings, leaves, all those kind of things are going to be good to throw in, and that will problem solve. So if you're getting stinky compost, you just have too many greens. So see how you can offset it. If it is slow to compost and doesn't have much heat, it probably isn't getting enough water. So maybe you're going through a dry spell. So go ahead and shoot it with the water hose, get it damp, and really get it working. It just needs a little bit of heat and a little bit of moisture to really get it breaking down. The other thing you can do if it smells sweet, it's just basically a lack of green material. So sometimes that'll cause it to break down slowly as well. And compost isn't an overnight thing. It definitely is a slow process, but if your compost seems like it's taking even longer than normal and it has a sweet smell, then you're going to need to add more greens. So more vegetable scraps, more coffee grounds, eggshells, things like that. There's not a lot of rules with composting, but one of the things you do want to keep in mind is the don'ts. Don't throw diseased plants in there. You definitely can dump out some old dead pots that are sitting on your porch, but not if they're diseased, because you don't want to spread that. So you're going to want to put that somewhere else, not in your compost. But any lifeless dead plants, throw it in there, break it down, circle of life. The other thing you're not going to want to put in is dairy, fatty foods. You're not going to want to put in any type of meat or fish or anything like that. Keep those away from your compost. Just think raw, organic materials. Okay, because I have a good sense of humor, I love sharing things that I did wrong in the beginning. So when I first started composting, I ordered all these like crazy worm casings, and I spent a fortune on all of this because I wanted worms in my compost. Little did I know that just by starting a compost, the worms will find you. You don't need to buy them. They actually will come. And that was just one of the silliest things that I ever did. Now, talking about worms, they will find your compost. There are certain things that will deter them. Obviously, all the no-nos that I just mentioned, but also too many citrus scraps and onions and things like that will throw off the pH and will deter worms from, it's just not a good environment for them. So you don't want to do too much of that. So consider using your citrus scraps and putting them in some vinegar and making a nice cleaner instead of throwing them in your compost. And don't order expensive worm casings because the worms will find you. So I get asked a lot, we have chickens. Do I throw my chicken poop in my compost? No, I do not. I actually spread that in my orchard. Now, my chickens love to get in my compost. Anytime I dump it out, they're in there eating. Is that a big deal? No. It's okay if they poop in your compost. It's not going to be that much, and it'll eventually break down. In fact, I actually like it because they turn it up and stir it for me. So stirring compost just basically consists of my shovel, and I have to stir it up. I have to keep it moving. You want to move it around so that you continue to churn it, and you'll see that like fresh, black, beautiful compost at the bottom. You're going to turn it around and throw that into your garden. So it's really great, especially if you get started and you find that you have a lot of waste and you have a lot of leaves and you have a lot of things you're throwing in it. That's great. Go ahead and start a second. And that way, one can be breaking down, you can move it and then throw your fresh into another so it can start breaking down while this is getting ready for your garden. It's great to have two going at the same time. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that this showed you just how easy it has to be. It's not beautiful, but it is super functional. And just remember, 50% of your waste does not need to be going in the trash. Compost bins, under the counter, on the counter, I don't care where you put it. Just put your compost in something, because you are going to not believe how wonderful it is for your garden. Don't spend money on that stuff anymore. Start breaking down your own materials and using your own compost in your garden.